What about your mother?
Mother is the icebox.
Yeah.
She's the penitentiary. One of my first recollections is walking in Moundsville State Prison, West Virginia. Big gray stone place. And I come to visit my mom. She was doing time there.
For what?
Strong arm robbery. Trying to make some food, put some food on the table and give me an operation when I was a child.
That's your first, one of your earliest memories?
Yeah, I remember that. That was a...
Are there happy memories?
I don't have that.
You don't have that?
I don't have that yin and yang that you do.
Is that yin yang?
Yeah, in other words, you can't make me unhappy.
Are sad memories, though, growing up?
I don't have all that.
Yeah. You do have it. You have an experience. You're an individual, one human being with experiences.
When you leave, go get a big rock and set it on a table.
Yeah.
I'm that rock on the table.
Visitor Center?
Huh?
Visitor Center?
It is? You hadn't had to see, we're gonna be in here all day.
Oh, really?
To ask a question I'm gonna be talking about during the tour, I'll let you know. Okay, so we're gonna get started here. Everything started because President Abraham Lincoln gave West Virginia statehood June 20th of 1863. The capital was Wheeling. The felons were all housed in county jails. And the new governor wanted to get them all in one spot. Moundsville was chosen for location for the penitentiary because it was close to the capital at the time. 1866, legislature approved everything. The construction started. The felons from county jails were all put to work in rock quarries in 3 counties. They hand cut all this sandstone and built their new home. They cut the largest stone here, 5.5 feet wide. They put it 6 feet underground. That was supposed to prevent tunnel escapes. It didn't work. There were around 500 escapes from here in 129 years. Okay, they kept all the felons here until they were moved out of here March 17th in 1895. 2 new facilities had been built. Most of them went to a new facility in Fayette County called Mount Olive. It's maximum security. Medium security inmates went to Huntsville. The rest went to a new facility here in Moundsville. It's the Northern Regional Correctional Center and Jail. Some of it houses state inmates. The rest is county jail for all the northern counties. And where we are right now became non-contact visitation in the 80s. You all were sitting in the seats inmates used. Your visitors would use that hallway that goes all the way around. They all had 20 hours of visitation a month. If they stayed under 20 for the month, they could visit as long as they liked on their visiting days. There was a correctional officer or a CO in the cage behind me. Now during your tour, you'll see some beautiful artwork. It's all done by inmates. If you went anywhere near the restrooms in the gift shop, which I don't think some of you did, there's Billy Foster's artwork. If you didn't see it yet, you might want to look at it after your tour. It's the best artwork you're ever going to see. Detail's amazing. Billy also did the painting here at Blackwater Falls and the painting in the hall just outside the window in the set. He came here in 1960. He came in for a robbery. He was 18. He behaved and made parole. Then he came back a second time for larceny. He behaved and made parole again. The third time back was for manslaughter. That time Billy caught his wife and best friend together during a struggle over a handgun. The friend died. Billy ended up here again. Stayed here then until 92. Spent 28 years total here. Then he stayed out until he died. He died of cancer 2005. A friend of his sells the artwork now. Most of that money goes to the family of the victim. Some of it goes to the Cancer Foundation, and the rest goes into the business. Now, as soon as we walk out the door, you're going to see a beautiful painting of the New River Porch Bridge. That one's painted by Danny Lehman. Danny was a gang leader, and outside of prison, avengers their motorcycle gang. In here, they had a lot of power. They lost their power, and some of them lost their lives when Aryan Brotherhood took control of this penitentiary in 1986. Danny and a younger friend of his were murdered the Wednesday before Thanksgiving on North Hall. We'll be on North Hall doing your tour, and I'll tell you all about the murders right where they happened. Okay, right now I'm going to tell you about executions. Early on in West Virginia, they did hangings in the counties. The counties sold tickets. People would take the kids along to see a hanging. The final hanging in the county happened in Jackson County and Reckley. John Morgan had murdered a widow Green and 2 children. He was hung December 1897. 5,000 tickets were sold, and they went for about $18 a piece. So Jackson County made a lot of money
What
there.
year?
Huh?
What year was that?
1897. Yeah. As I like to say, Jackson County got rich that day. After that, the state took over executions, then they were done here. The first hanging here happened in 1899. They're still open to the public, so you can come here and see a hanging. The final public hanging here happened in June of 1931. Frank Heyer was a large man with weak neck muscles. When the trap door opened, Frank decapitated him. That year, the state made a decision to go to executions by invitation only. Later hangings here were done in a building called the Death House. There were 4 cells in that death house. They kept condemned men in those cells for the last day or 2 of their lives. The gallows had 13 steps. And the final hanging here happened in 1949. There were 85 total hangings. If you didn't happen to look in the museum before your tour, if you have time after your tour, there's pictures of everybody that was ever executed here. Well, so the final hangings, 1949. Warden Skeen heard the electric chair was more humane. Didn't know what electric chair even looked like. So he took one of his prisoners that was a carpenter to a high state penitentiary in Columbus so he could draw a pattern for this chair from their chair. The carpenter inmate didn't stay very popular here, so he had to be moved somewhere else. The first 2 men to die in that chair were involved in the same crime. Painter and Burdett were executed one after the other on the same evening in 1951. The final execution in that chair happened in 59. There were 9 total. Now, if you saw the movie The Green Mile, you got a pretty good idea what an execution looks like. The buttons you see, and this was all what was in the death house. Those buttons were attached to a generator, which won't fit in here. The night before the execution, an electrician will be alone in the death house to activate one of those. The following day, 3 men were chosen. Anyone chosen that refused to push the button would no longer have a job here. West Virginia ended up abolishing their death penalty in 1965. The death house here was torn down the same year. So there is no longer a death house here, but this is what was in it when it was here.
So you're saying that there were 3 men, each pushed a button, none of them knew for if it was their button?
Correct.
Okay.
No. That's the point. Most any execution, they have more than one person involved, so no one has to bear all that guilt. Okay.
It could have been any employee in the prison?
They had to be prison guards,
Oh.
but it would be like, they probably didn't choose the same person twice. I don't know how they chose them or how they picked them. I just know that there were 3, always 3. Okay, anything else, guys?
Question. When you said that earlier, when the tickets for the hangings were $18 back then, how much would that be today?
I wish I knew. I'm gonna say probably 100, several hundred maybe. At least 100. It would be, what I would compare it to is going to a concert for the most popular star in the world. So people seem to like to go see hangings back then. I don't know if they saved up for them or how they came up with all that money, or any rich people got to do it, I'm not sure, but it was expensive.
I've got a question. I've heard when I was a kid that Moundsville had a choice of getting Morgantown University or Preston, and they took to prison. Is that a true story?
No.
Okay.
It was, the reason the prison was built before the university, and the reason Moundsville was chosen for the prison was because it was close to Wheeling.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, that, I always believed that too.
My
So-
mother went to her grave believing that.
Yeah. Most people around here did believe that, because that's what we were always told. But then I read an article, after I started working here. I don't even know if we still have it hanging here. I think we do, it's out in the museum area. It tells you that, you know, it says prisoner university, and it explains that
Yeah.
it wasn't that way. It was just, it was something that started, I don't know when it started, but everybody I know that ever looked around here believed that we had a choice between having a prison or a university, and we chose a prison. But that wasn't the truth. It was just put here because it was close to the capital.
So when did the capital go to Charleston? What year was that?
I don't know, this is what happened. Early on in the state history, it kept moving back and forth. They'll go to Charleston, then come back to Wheeling, then go to Charleston, back to Wheeling. Then they finally settled for Charleston because it's more centrally located in the state than Wheeling is. Anything else, guys? Okay, now we get out here and you look at Danny Lehman's artwork. Take a look at Danny Lehman's picture, and then you'll know who I'm talking about when I'm talking about the guy that was murdered on the fall. It was added due to overcrowding. Back in the 1920s, I'm talking the late 1920s, the penitentiary over on that side, he had 800 cells. They ended up with over 2,000 inmates. So they had to put 3 guys in a cell. Because of that, the state decided to build a new one. Now, the way they were planning on paying for construction, they used to let contractors open businesses in here, and prisoners would work for them. The prisoners that were trustees could work outside of prison. And that was putting over $100,000 a year into West Virginia's budget. It's a lot of money in the 20s. So they started construction on New Wall early 1929. In October 29, the Great Depression happened. And shortly after that, Congress passed a law that nobody could hire prisoners to work. So that slowed down construction a lot. When World War II happened, they couldn't buy building material. So they didn't end up getting New Wall finished till 30 years later. Completion date was 1959. Now, in the later years here, they all lived on the New Wall side of the prison. We're gonna be on a new all cell block before you leave today. That's the last place we're going. So most inmates live on new all cell block. They call them their mainline population inmates. That's most of the people here. There's a cell block called Rat Row or PC. Protective custody inmates are normally child molesters or snitches, and they spend 22 hours a day in their cells. Then there's Honor Hall, and that's for the better behaved inmates or trustees. Now, on most days, this is how, as long as these guys weren't in protective custody, they were in their cells all day. They can leave at 8 a.m. and then have to be back in for good till 10 p.m. So every hour they open the cell doors for 10 minutes. That 10 minutes they have to get to wherever they need to go or back in their cells. When that's going on, there's 200 to 300 inmates coming through the hallway. There's only one CO with them, and he does not have a weapon. The only CO with a weapon is in there. You can see where the gun ports are. We walk around, you'll see they're on all three sides. You also, if you take a close look at him, you're going to see that he can't see most of the people in the hallway here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to head towards the other side. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a riot that happened in 1886 because this was the captain's office before that. Because Captain Glasscock was one of the hostages during the 86 riot, they moved to captain's office in 86. Guys, as soon as we turn this corner, we'll be in the part of the penitentiary as well, the 1800s. Back in the 1800s, the first cell block was at this end of the penitentiary. That cell block had 240 4x7 cells with stone walls. They didn't get any light in those cells, so they used the bucket as a toilet. In the early 1900s, things improved some. They added the North Hall cell block. They took the cell block here out and replaced it with the South Hall cell block. Then they had 800 5x7 steel cells with toilets and sinks. Electricity was put in, they all had light in their cells. Now the South Hall cell block that used to be here was removed in the 70s. You can still see it because when we see North Hall, you're going to see the same cells. When they removed South Hall, they converted the lower level into dining hall and kitchen. Sometimes when guys were cooking in the kitchen, there were rats running across tables, and sometimes they were cooking roaches out of mashed potatoes. Other than that, the food was pretty good. The worst riot ever started in the dining hall, New Year's Day, 1986. A lot of guys that worked here were partying too much the night before and didn't show up for work. One of the guys that didn't make it to work that day was the guy that was supposed to be up there with a weapon. So when inmates came in with homemade weapons, they were the only ones with weapons. 16 COs and one food service employee were taken hostage. None of them were murdered. 3 inmates that were snitches were brutally murdered. The inmates chose Danny Lehman and Alvin Gregory that worked at the law library to do the negotiating. And Danny wouldn't settle anything till Governor Archmore got here. He's on a family vacation in Florida. He got called immediately. He hung around for another day and didn't show up till the following day. That made the hostages pretty angry. So they would not shake his hand when they were released. They negotiated for 52 hours. Inmates got most of their demands. The big one was the state did agree to build them a new cafeteria. It got finished in 1987 and cost over $3 million. Then they put walls up here, and the room we're in now became contactless station. So, you know, it's the family from the airport. One of the artists, there's 3 artists that did all this, and one of them is colorblind. So I'm blaming Sean Adamy for the Ninja Turtles because they're wearing the wrong colors. And name deal. You all know about the mound across the street from here?
Yeah.
You girls know about it? No. That big hill across here, did you see it? If you look out the window there, you can see it. That's an ancient Indian burial mound. And
Inmates do this?
yes. And there's a museum, if you girls are interested in Indian history, there's a lot of artifacts over there. And since the state runs the mound, it doesn't cost you anything to go over there, so if you want to, since you're in Moundsville anyhow, don't have to spend any money, you may as well. Anyhow, Dale Bragg made these. They were donated over to the mound. Eventually they sent them back because they got tired of hearing complaints from parents and teachers about the nudity. And about 9 years ago, this is a training center for military, correctional officers, anybody that's involved in law enforcement. U.S. Marines were training here. I don't know what they were doing back there with night goggles, but the little boy startled one of them. And you don't see that well with night goggles. So one of the Marines hit the little boy in the face with the butt of his rifle. So he hasn't had a face for quite a while now. The man who made those got moved to the Northern Regional Correctional Center. He had an outside gardening job. He left the garden one day and went to California. Out there he murdered a police officer, and he did die of AIDS in prison out there. Okay, guys, we're gonna head this way now. I'm gonna take you down to where the cafeteria that is that they got after the 86 riot. The state shop from the center door to the corner. The state shop's where they keep state issue clothing and bedding. So when they're getting their clothing and bedding, it's passed out through here. Actually, the prison is very haunted, and I call this guy Jasper. The thing is, what you can hear, there's some windows rattling, so don't get too rattled, folks.
I thought it was a bird in here.
Yeah, there's a hospital and infirmary right above us. And it must be windy today because it's rowdy. This wall is where the kitchen started, where this wall came out here. A nurse is in there, puts her meds in there and slides it out. Somebody watches them take meds. And that's a good thing, but it didn't really matter because there were all kind of drugs being smuggled into here all kind of ways. As soon as they walked through the door, they were given spoons and forks. It was actual silverware. They divided in, went down one on either side. Their tray came out the long window on the end. When the last man in line picked up a tray, they all had 20 minutes to eat. They fed them in shifts. They fed around 500 here in an hour and a half. Inmates work in the kitchen are level 1s and 2s. That means they're non-violent. Higher level the guy rates, the more violent he would be. Levels went to 6. Round stainless steel tables were bolted to the floor, seats were bolted to tables. They had a salad bar coming off the center post right there. They could go through the food line only once. They could go to the salad bar as much as they wanted. Now the employees ate in here also. They have their own section. It's on the other side of the wall where the truck's painted. When the meals are finished, their trays went to dishwashing areas or on both ends. They had to get the spoon and fork back to the door. The CO at the door watched a guy put his spoon in one pan, his fork in the other. They didn't let anybody out of here till the spoons and forks were all counted. Now here's where the CO is here with the weapon. Again, he can't see anybody. There's one CO on this side, he's above their heads when they're eating. And because of the angle of the weapon, he couldn't see anybody towards the wall up that way. He couldn't see him in the center of the room. Couldn't see anybody on the opposite side. So he's pretty much useless. Okay, now they put the white paint on the walls eventually, and that was because they started dressing inmates in khaki and they became invisible against the walls. Tall building in the center. That was the administration building. First floor of that building, facing us, is the commissary and the post office. Main entrance to the prison was the street side. And right in the center of that building is something called the wheel. Couldn't get in or out of here without going through the wheel. And I'm going to tell you more about it when you get to see it. The second floor there was offices. The top two floors were the warden's residence. Warden, Mrs. Warden, and all the little wardens lived up there in a fourth floor apartment.
Wow.
Now, they got to move out of there in the late 1950s. It was Warden's scheme. He moved the wife and two boys over to the new house that was built just outside the south gate of the new hall. This end was the South Hall cell block. It's the one that was removed in the 70s. After being removed, they put a hospital and infirmary on the upper level. Blue door there starts it. At this end, there's doctor's offices, then examining rooms, then the hospital ward, then the psych ward. Nurses were always working. Doctors, dentists, and optometrists came in twice a week. Psychiatrists, psychologists were in once a week. Coming in to clean the guy's teeth were 18-year-old dental hygiene students from West Liberty State College. The largely building over this way was called Prison Industries. That's where most of the inmates worked. They had different jobs and different pay rates. Most of the guys here worked an 8-hour day. They averaged down to about $1.25 a day. The best paid inmates made license plates. I'm being careful here because I'm walking backwards. The guys that made the license plates ended up getting their wages docked. After their wages were docked, they finally quit peeing in the paint. After everybody was out of here, the building was converted into classrooms and offices. The penitentiary became a training center for law enforcement, military, and correctional officers. The first smoke riot happened 2 months after they moved the guys out of here. They moved them out in March. They had the first smoke riot the first week of May, '95. It's been going on ever since. Law enforcement and corrections come here from all over the world for it. We've had as many as 18 countries participating. Most of the states in the U.S. send a team here. There's about 2,000 people in here when the mock riots happen. The R2 gate, coming out 2 at a time, got 6 inmates on this yard. They had only an hour a day of yard time, so most of the time they were in a 5x7 cell. Now, they let them have a telephone booth in 1985. It was over in this corner, so guys could call their loved ones. They took the phone booth out of here in August of '86, put razor wire up. That was because the Franklin brothers used to top the telephone booth to get over the fence when they escaped from here. There was a building 40 feet from the wall over that way that housed women. Women here were all moved to Penn Springs in 1947. After that, this was an all-male penitentiary. When they still had women here, one of the women here was Charles Manson's mother. Her and her brother, Charlie's uncle, were in for our robbery. Now, Charlie grew up around here. We had an aunt and uncle 8 miles north of here in McMeckin. Charlie wanted to come back. Stop in the museum after your tour. You can read the letter that Warden Kircher received from Charles Manson in 1983. He's asking to be moved from California to here. Can't get no mercy in California. Please answer Charles Manson. Warden Kircher's answer was, "Dear Charlie, when hell freezes over." So, all this over here, when the prison was still running, was called Old Man's Colony. Those are older guys that can no longer protect themselves from younger inmates. When they moved them out of here, youngest one was 75. Old man Freeman Collins was 92. Now, Freeman did not get to be Freeman for much of his life. He was a boy when he came through these gates in a horse-drawn wagon. Now, because he'd been here a long time, he was pretty old in his 70s and considered harmless. He got paroled. He came back 5 years later for murdering a parole officer. Get back in history again. The wagon gate was the first structure completed when they built the place. In the 1800s, those were dirt floors. The doors were wooden and came open in the center. Because it took a while to build all these walls and get a cell block built. For a long time, prisoners were sleeping in there on dirt floors or the wooden floors above. Now, they did eventually replace the wooden doors with those steel doors. They weigh about 14 tons. If you want to see a counterweight that operated them, it's over in the corner on this side. If you want to look at the big hall in there, where the trap doors open, supposedly that's where the first 9 hangings here took place.
Told me when she worked on death row and they took that dude in to hang him and his head popped off and went down them 13 stairs and rolled over by her. It scared her. You know, so I said, wow, that sure is a far-out trip, Mom. So then when I got up on death row in cell 13 for 9 counts of murder, 1969, and I looked at her fears, that guy's head popping off that hangman's noose, and I said to myself, my goodness, what the hell am I doing here? I didn't want to come here.
This is how they fit them in. There were 2 bunks then, and they had a 3rd guy and a mattress on the floor.
There's 3 guys in this hole? Really?
There were in 1920s and 30s.
Yeah.
So the prison was overcrowded. I don't know about the 40s and 50s because they didn't get new wall finished till 59. There could have been 3 guys in there for a long time. The 4 most violent inmates here were eventually moved to these 4 cells and separated from everybody. It's going to sound crazy, but true. They were named Red, White, Blue, and Rusty. The most powerful inmate in the penitentiary was Red Snyder. I believe Red was the leader of Aryan Brotherhood. Red and Rusty Laster could normally play well together, so they were the only 2 allowed to be on the yard together. Well, the problem with that is Rusty is Blue's punk, and he takes his orders from Blue. Blue wanted Red to die, and Rusty got the order to do Red's murder. Red's murder happened in the afternoon, November 19th, 1992. The CO came back and unlocked Red's door and Rusty's door. 2 The COs are out of here before the doors open. Because of the slam rod. See the slam rod going above the doors? They'll cover them till the CO leaves. When he came open that afternoon, Rusty ran into Red's cell with the weapon he had got from his bed and stabbed Red 37 times. Yeah. And the place is haunted, and Red is one of the spirits that's still here. Yep. That's why I wanted to leave his mark here.
Yeah.
Wanted to be known. These guys are all old. Well, Red's dead. Everybody else is old. They're still living now. I don't know about Bruce White, but Rusty got out of prison for a while but went back in. Elijah Blue Sergeant here. He's out to Northern Regional now, and he's harmless. They say all he does out there is play Game Boy all day. So, they get a little more harmless when they get old. Okay, I'm going to show you how to make a weapon. Can you see where the weapon's been cut from the steel plate on the door here? Just follow my finger.
Yeah.
So, in
How
order
did they cut that?
dental floss with toothpaste on it.
Wow. Really?
Really. It takes a little bit of time before they got a
They had
weapon.
time on their hands.
Yeah. If you look inside the cell towards this wall, you all can see where that guy sharpened these weapons.
People in this cell, these cells?
Uh,
After the crowding got less?
Well, yeah, this stayed like a normal cell block until the 70s. Yeah. And there were 2 people in a cell. Then, at some point in time, the law said they couldn't force 2 guys, I don't know if that was 60s or 70s. I'm saying probably 70s because really civil rights got big then. They could not force 2 men to share a 5x7 cell. They could ask them if they would volunteer to share a cell, but they couldn't make them share a cell. Now, they put steel mesh on the cell doors and put all this fencing up to protect COs. Now, they got even more protection in later years because the state investigated the penitentiary in 1986. They were issued flak jackets, helmets with visors, and shields. They received a plexiglass shield on wheels that were rolled right against the cell door to give them only enough room to put the food tray through. This is called, there's 2 cell blocks. There's one just like this on the opposite side. That's the A block, this is the B block. They did keep the more violent inmates over here on this side. They let them out of their cells, only 2 at a time. Walking through here, inmates are supposed to stay over on this side of the red line. There's a CO on that side of the fence with a weapon that walks through with them. So they had to make room for the wheelchair to go through. Now, can you picture that guy in that cell trying to turn a wheelchair around or even move?
Get arm off the toilet.
In the cage up here, the arm you see right there is what controls that slam rod that's running above the steel doors. It's only controlled by manpower. This is the common locking system in older prisons, and this is the reason prisons are called the slammer. Okay guys, I'm gonna bring you on this side now. Gang, because they were responsible for the 86 riot. Problem with that is there's a lot of Aryan Brotherhood here. I don't know how much y'all know about Aryan Brotherhood, but they're really bad people. And they will control, and they will kill anybody that gets in their way. They operate like organized crime. So when Avengers got moved here, they got hurt or murdered. Danny was moved to the first cell over here in the A block right after the riot. 2 months before the murders, Danny's younger friend, Michael McMillan, had been transferred here from Huttonsville. Michael was a good-looking 26-year-old who could have been paroled the following year, but he wasn't alive. He wasn't a target, he just ended up in the wrong place that day. The plan was to get Danny to the back of the cell block alone. They used a man that was friendly with Danny to get him back there. 2 men were hid, one of them grabbed Danny from behind, one other was stabbing. Michael was crossing over back there when this was all going on, and he got stabbed in the back. A weapon hit a main artery that went to Michael's heart. I talked to the EMT that took him to the hospital. He had already bled out by the time he got him into the hospital. Danny was taken to Ohio Valley Medical Center in Wheeling on November 26th. November 28th, Danny was pronounced brain dead and disconnected from machines. It was a long, narrow weapon, I'm guessing a piece of fencing. The weapon went into Danny's eye and came out the back of his head. Now, I'm going to tell you the other side of the story because the guy supervising his cell block that year let this all happen. On a report that I read that went to the state that year, the report came from the COs working the cell block. They said the supervisor wasn't keeping cell doors locked. So when they took Danny back there, the guys in the back had their cell doors open so nobody could see back there. He wasn't doing strip search, so it got easy to get weapons in. When they're out on the yard, they would get the guys working in Industries building to smuggle things out of there. The easiest thing to get out of there and back here were packages of razor blades. Guy'd wrap some tape around razor blades, shove them in his pocket, drop it along the fence here. The men here got them back in here under their tongues. At the end of the report, the final complaint was even after the Lehman McMillan murders, he's done nothing to secure the cell block. So the state took over. They did make some new rules. They hired some new people. People working here got better training. They got all the protective gear they needed to work the cell block. And from that time on, cell doors were kept locked and the strip search was always done. I'm going to walk over here and show you the doors that are closed, and these rods are going through the gate on both sides. The inmates put their clothing through here, they bend over, shake out their hair, open their mouth, lift their tongue. If they wear dentures, they take them out. They put their arms in the air, turn around slowly, bend over and cough. Close back, an hour on the yard. Going back in, there's strip search right here. So once they're in here, they go to the shower. Showers are back there. The thing about their showers, these guys did some nasty things to COs back in the cupboard. Now the COs control their shower water because the plumbing's coming from a little bathroom there. Sometimes they got showers with only cold water. Sometimes only hot was turned on. And sometimes as soon as they lathered up, the water went off. And what did you say about the guy with the broomstick that you would probably shoot him? Well, the COs didn't carry weapons, but they did. That CO, by the time he got over his injuries and came back to work, there was payback. I think they squared the fire hose into the guy's cell.
Yeah.
If you want on the wheel, you can get on it. This is the wheel I'm talking about. This is how everybody get in and out of the prison. It was put in here. It would move except for that. See that over there? That's what's keeping it from moving. Okay. It was put in here 1892. It was the only one in this country. The only other one in the world was in England. There's 3-car motor under here. Come on in, you can see better from in here.
I've been through this before.
The guy operating the wheel is in the cage over here. That lever's what makes it move. So it did not matter if you're coming in here to work here, if you're coming in here to live here, or you're just coming in to visit. Everybody coming through that front door is processed in this office. Once processing's done, he's gonna move the lever until the opening lines up to the office door, and take you back to prison. When inmates had visitors, they got on the wheel from this side, in that direction, would take them into their old non-contact visitation. Okay, guys, gotta get off. Now, the keyhole is the most important thing on this wheel. And you do remember that the warden's family lives in this building. So, nobody ever got through here and attacked the warden's family. That's because it's impossible to open it on this side. It seems to me like they knew better how to handle security back here in the 1800s than they did in later years. Oh, I'm gonna get crazy again. I found another door open. We're just gonna walk through there, guys. I'll go right up with you. These gates are, when they still had a death penalty here, there were 4 cells back this way on the 2nd level that were death row cells. After South Hall was removed, this was part of the old kitchen. This area here had refrigerators and freezers, and this is where all the food was stored. Y'all get Netflix? Yes, no? Yes. Well, those of you that do, you have to go. There's a new series out called Mind Hunters. Seen any of it yet?
I think I watched one.
Huh?
I think I saw the beginning.
What's it called? Mind Hunters.
This is my serial killer.
Oh. Well, if you get episode 9, the first part of episode 9 is filmed here at the penitentiary. Huh? You'll recognize some of the things you saw today. That's when the FBI first, the one guy's supposed to get the one, it's when the FBI first got into criminal profiling. Something like what they do on Criminal Minds? Yeah, I knew. I watched that show and the name wouldn't come into my mind. I can remember everything about the person, but in the outside world I get lost. And this right here is called the hot spot because if you were coming down that hall and I wanted to get you, I could be waiting here. If you come around this corner and I wanted to hurt you, I could be waiting here. So, just gun ports on this end of the prison just don't seem to work. Guys on this end of the prison can be out of their cells all day. And they can be out on their yard anytime they want to be. Much different than the guys on North Hall. The prison had its own football, softball, baseball, basketball, and boxing teams. Local men came in here and played sports against inmates. Actually, John Marshall, the local high school football team, used to come in here and play against the inmates. The things were open to the public. Did get bussed out of here and played outside of prison. Now the chapel over there, it was built by Christian inmates. 1980, the local church's help, they donated $20,000 to the penitentiary. Christian inmates added their own money and built their own chapel. Shortly after that, even though Reverend Payne tried to fight it, the Hare Krishna and the Satan worshippers were allowed to use the chapel that the Christians built here. The bathroom, when it was built by inmates, they stacked the blocks from the floor clear to the ceiling. They built the most private bathroom on earth in the middle of the prison yard. Well, you got that figured out. Anything they didn't want to get caught doing happened there. The reason the walls came down, there was a man here, pretty well known for being a troublemaker and running his mouth. When they found him in there, he was still breathing. His head looked like ground beef. He had to have reconstructive surgery to his head. Shortly after I started working here, I heard he was out to Northern Regional Facility and still running his mouth. The white building there was the captain of the guard's office until it was moved in '86. After captain was moved out of there, some inmates started running a small closed circuit radio station from there that only broadcast into here. They called that station WPEM. Underground there is where they had the hole. They still had a hole there. They had 4 cells down there with block walls. Nobody needs to run underground because the cells aren't there anymore. When they put men in the hole and closed the steel door, it was pitch black there. Because it's underground, it's damp and moldy. And when it rains really hard, it will flood down there. Because of all that, during a riot here in 1973, the state agreed that that was unhealthy and inhumane treatment, so they ripped the cells out of there and they haven't used that hole since 1973. You can look down from the top of the steps. You can pretty much get the idea, but don't go underground. There's anything down there to see anyhow. And as soon as you're all ready, I'm going to take you in the cell block at this end. And at the cell block at this end, you can get yourself locked up if you want to.
Two guys in here too?
It was built for 2 guys. And when they changed the law that they couldn't force 2 guys to share a cell, some of them still had 2 bunks in them, because they were the ones that were willing to volunteer to share a cell. The new wall is the largest cell block here. The guys housed here are called mainline population inmates. What we have is 4 cell blocks the size of the one we're in. There's over 300 cells. That's what happens when Hannibal Lecter's your cellmate.
That's what happens when what?
Hannibal Lecter's your cellmate.
Oh, I see.
There's the problem with there being so many cells and 4 cell blocks. There's as little as 3 COs working a shift. There's never more than 5. So they just can't be everywhere. COs working here had as much control here as inmates let them have. Okay, you guys, any of you want to lock in?
Yes.
Okay, get yourself in the cells.
Which one?
Okay, down this way. Anyone down this way is fine. Anybody
Okay.
else? We're gonna have one lock up? What are you doing? Okay, I'll go. I'll be locked up. I'll be locked up.
Yes, you have to get it.
Okay, stay put, stay back away from the door.
We're gonna do is I'm gonna open back up, Mayor. I'm leaving it. Oh, wow.
Now you're gonna have Christmas.
You're done. I told you they might not open it back up. It's an old Penitentiary.
Did you pay her?
Well, I can usually open them, but sometimes some of them mess up sometimes.
Yeah.
We had a mess up. Don't worry, you'll be out in a couple hours. We got a full staff of maintenance today, I just have to find them.
Okay. I'm free.
Freedom class.
And that's all it is, it goes through the ducts, it sucks the stale air out of the cells and brings the fresh in, that's as much air as you're getting. Okay. The guys living here normally painted their cells. They would decorate them, try to make them as homey as possible, and they bought their own personal items to use in the cells. Because it got so hot in the summer, most of them had a small fan with plastic blades. They had televisions and radios. One guy here owned a $7,000 stereo system. Don't know how he got it or where he put it, but I've been told that by 2 different COs. They could not turn anything on unless they were using headsets. They got cable for their TVs, but they did have to pay their own cable bill. Okay, now we're going to turn it to the other side. A lawsuit got started here in 1981 called Crane versus Bordenkircher. When it was settled, Crane wasn't living any longer and Bordenkircher wasn't warden. It was about living conditions. Circuit Court Judge Arthur Reckel Wheeling was rolling on the lawsuit, but he had never been inside the prison. They got his attention one day and got him to come here. How they did that, they all wrote their letters on the same day. Every letter he opened that day contained a saran wrap roach. He came, he saw, he didn't like. Almost anywhere here, there were live wires hanging, pretty dangerous. The roaches got about that big. One of the COs here said you put saddles on them. The rats got the size of cats or small dogs. They came out toward us pretty often. The plumbing was a mess. The toilets and sinks went in the 50s. They took a lot of abuse over the years. Sometimes what was in your toilet would end up in your sink. Bigger problem than that, most of the time you've got the guy's raw storage, the guy left above you, his raw storage is dripping from your ceiling. Anyhow, the other thing was the cell size was ruled illegal. After Judge Rex saw all this, he took the lawsuit to the state Supreme Court. In 1886, the Supreme Court deemed the penitentiary cruel and unusual punishment. They wanted everybody out of here by June of '92. Wasn't even going to take these guys in '92. Then the Supreme Court up to date to the end of '94. They actually got them out of here in March of '95. So that's all I got for you folks. You've been a great group. Paid good attention. Asked a lot of good questions. And I enjoyed my tour with you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
And what'd you think of your tour with me?
Yep, pretty good.
Thank you. Now, thanks so much. There's some websites we use, and we would like your opinion of your tour. We got our own website, we got our own Facebook page, and we use TripAdvisor a lot. That gives us a lot of good advertising. If you go on any of them websites and say what you just told me, that you had a great tour, you can say Donna was your tour guide. If you complain about anything, George did your tour.
How many, do you just do one tour a day?
No, I did three. Yeah, I get to walk around the prison all day long.
Yeah.
Here, it was a guard. Actually had his son on tour one day. The guy counted his footsteps every time he came down the cell block. And his cell door happened to be open one day, and he threw him over and told him. And during the riot, when the guys got murdered during the riot, they hung him from one of the upper tiers. They tied TV cable around his neck. And of course, TV cable's not that strong, so it broke, and he ended up on the floor down here. He wasn't dead. They tortured him for a couple hours before he actually died.
Oh, that was during the riot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the two incidents I know of. They've been working to turn off, but that's the ones I know about.